my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. I'd like to take a minute to talk about this episode's sponsor, Aeroflow Breast Pumps. Did you know that breast pumps and milk storage bags, maternity compression garments, even lactation education and support can all be covered by your insurance? Aeroflow helps millions of parents unlock these breastfeeding and postpartum essentials by working directly with your insurance company to get these free essentials shipped straight to your door. Aeroflow offers all major pump brands, including Medela, Spectra, Motif, Lancino, Amita, LV, Willow, and more. Visit aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour to fill out their free and easy qualify through insurance form. Don't forget to use the promo code BIRTHHOUR15 in their online shop for 15% off all supplies and accessories. You've got enough on your plate. Why not let Aeroflow Breast Pumps help support you on your breastfeeding journey? At the end of this episode, I talk with Kate not only about getting her breast pump for free through Aeroflow, but also about taking advantage of their online lactation classes. So stay tuned for that conversation. Before we get to today's birth story, I want to talk a little bit about our online childbirth course. It's called Know Your Options, and this is the course you've been looking for if you just have that gut feeling that you know you should be taking a childbirth course, but maybe the one that's being offered to you by your care provider is not exactly what you're looking for. It might be more catered towards the type of birth they want you to have versus making you informed of all your different options and how to address different things that happen in birth, because as this podcast has shown us, birth is very unpredictable. So we would love to have you check out our 12-module course. You can go to thebirthhour.com/course to see detailed outlines of what is included in the course. You will also get a bonus course called Beyond the First Latch that is an additional 6 modules all about pumping, feeding your baby, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan. And we have a special coupon code for you. It's 100OFF for $100 off enrollment. Again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. Another way you can get involved with the Birth Hour community is by joining our Patreon. This is where you pledge your support of the Birth Hour at $5 a month or more, and you get perks in return, like access to all of our archived episodes. That's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes. We've been putting out birth stories since 2015, and those are all available in our archives via Patreon. And you also get access to our private Facebook community, which is a really great group of people who are there to support you, become friends, and just encourage you on this journey through parenthood. So find out more about that at patreon.com/birthhour. Today's birth story guest is Lindsay, and she shares briefly about her first birth, which was pretty traumatic for her with a retained placenta. She was planning to have another epidural birth, but things moved very quickly, and she ended up having an unmedicated hospital birth with her toddler present. All right, let's hear from Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Bryn. Thank you so much for having me. I have been a longtime listener, so this is really exciting for me to get to come on and share my story.
Very cool. All right. Well, before we get to your stories, can you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah, for sure. I live in a really small town in Oregon's wine country called Carlton. It's about 45 minutes outside of Portland with my husband, Ajay, and we have been married for coming on 6 years now. We are both chiropractors, so we own and run our own chiropractic clinic together in Portland. And we have 2 kids. We have Georgia, who is 3.5 years old, and Cameron, who is 7 months old.
All right. So I know you want to mostly focus on the more recent birth story, but we want to have the context of the first one. So why don't you just go ahead and share kind of whatever you feel like is important from your first birth?
Yeah. So like you said, I'm going to focus mostly on that second one, but our first experience with pregnancy and how that birth story went played a major role in us deciding to have a second and how that birth went. So I'm just going to give a real quick rundown on that and then focus on the second one. So okay. We had a bit of a difficult journey getting pregnant the first go around. Shortly after we got married, we had decided we wanted to start having kids. And it was taking a lot longer than we had originally expected. And in that time, we had a couple miscarriages back to back. And about the 18-month mark that we'd been trying, we were just about to start some fertility treatment, and we found out we were pregnant. And this go around seemed to be successful. So my first pregnancy, I had a very typical normal pregnancy, other than I had a subchorionic hematoma. So at 9 weeks, I had a pretty big bleed, and then I bled off and on from 9 weeks till about 19 weeks, which after going through the miscarriages was a bit traumatizing, but everything ended up being okay with the pregnancy, very typical and normal otherwise. So we had selected a nurse midwife to monitor the pregnancy, and we were planning on having hopefully a lower intervention birth in the hospital. I was hoping to go into labor on my own and be able to move around for a while and all that, but also knowing ultimately I'd probably want an epidural sooner or later. So with the first birth, that's kind of exactly what happened. My husband and I's anniversary is July 20th, and her due date was July 23rd. So kind of the whole pregnancy I had in the back of my head that she was going to end up being born on our anniversary, which at first I thought was kind of cute, but then I thought more about how we were going to lose our anniversary celebration. So sure enough, July 19th, about 4:30 p.m., I started noticing some contractions happening in a fairly regular pattern. And I was looking at the clock going, okay, I'm a first-time mom. The chance of this baby coming before midnight is pretty slim. It looks like it is going to be an anniversary baby after all. So I labored at home for a while, and I was using one of those contraction timing apps on your phone. And about 10:30 p.m., it popped up that you might want to consider going to the hospital. And I probably took that advice a little too seriously. In hindsight, I knew it was a bit early. I was still pretty with it and joking with my husband. But we went, and I was only a couple centimeters dilated and not in active labor yet. So they sent us home to get some rest and wait till things had moved along a little bit. So I did not get much rest that night. The contractions did increase in intensity and came more often. So about 4 a.m. or so, I kind of started to get sick, and the contractions were coming about that every 5 minutes and lasting a minute they suggested. So we went back to the hospital, and I was 5 or 6 centimeters dilated and in active labor. So they admitted us. And later that morning, I got my epidural, which was great. The anesthesiologist did a great job. I could feel the pressure of the contractions, but never any pain, and I could move around a little bit. So I had a really great experience with that. It took a while for me to get to 10 centimeters. So we just kind of rested that day and watched a movie and had a pretty enjoyable day. And about 6 o'clock that evening, it was time to push. I was 10, and I pushed for about half an hour, and everything was going pretty well. And at 6:49 p.m., my daughter Georgia was born, weighing 6 pounds and 5 ounces. So I was just so relieved that she had been there safely, kind of after what we had gone through to get her there. And I'd been anxious all pregnancy that something was going to happen and we were going to lose another pregnancy. And I was just really relieved that she was here safely. Unfortunately, after she was born, that was kind of when some complications started. I could see the birth team keeping an eye on the clock, and 20 minutes had gone by, and then 30 and 40, and my placenta still had not come out. So they called the attending OB that was on that day, and she came in, and it was determined I was going to need a manual placenta extraction. So they at first had a student attempt it, which I was totally fine with. Through my schooling, I had always needed a lot of student hours and that. So I was fine with that. And she was unsuccessful. And then the attending OB tried and also was unsuccessful. So it was extremely uncomfortable, even with the epidural. So those of you that have gone through it without an epidural, like, hats off to you. I think, Bryn, you have gone through that. And
yeah,
it was really uncomfortable. So
what did it feel like with an epidural? Just like a lot of pressure? Or was it really painful?
A lot of pressure, like a ton of pressure. And it was still like I could feel a lot of pain with that too. So
okay,
it felt like, oh gosh, how do I even describe it? A really intense pressure that almost felt like it was going to be too much pressure and I don't know what would happen, but very uncomfortable. And I started to hemorrhage pretty good. My husband talks about kind of this bag of blood on the floor underneath me and getting pretty freaked out. So they started to talk about needing to go to the OR to get my placenta out and potentially needing a blood transfusion. I was just really worried about being separated from this new baby girl I had just had and had gone through a lot to get. So I was extremely nervous about that. And thankfully, the attending OB agreed to try one more time. And she went in, and I just remember she was like in my uterus, like up what seemed to be up to her elbow, and her whole arm was shaking. But she was able to get it out, thankfully. And she told me afterwards it was the stickiest placenta she had ever had to manually extract. So, and then they were able to get my hemorrhaging under control with some medication, and my hemoglobin levels were borderline. So they agreed to just give me some IV fluids and an iron transfusion and keep an eye on it. So thankfully I did avoid the OR and a blood transfusion. But because of what had happened with my placenta, they sent it off to the pathologist. And when the pathology report came back, they noted that there was a significant amount of my uterine muscle wall still attached to it. And they diagnosed me with placenta accreta. Placenta accreta is a condition where the placenta adheres a little too deeply into the actual muscle wall rather than just like the surface endometrium. And it can be quite dangerous in pregnancy because it can cause a lot of that hemorrhaging or bleeding. So I kind of knew it was a fairly serious condition and tucked that away in the back of my head, but I wasn't focused too much on it. So I guess one thing I did want to add too is I don't want to scare all the women out there that have had retained placentas thinking they for sure had this condition as well. I asked about it and my midwife explained that it's one of the causes of a retained placenta, but there's other causes as well, such as like your contractions just aren't as strong after you've had the baby or anything like that. So if someone's had a retained placenta, it doesn't necessarily mean they've had this condition as well. So just putting that disclaimer so I'm not stressing anybody out. But and then also relevant, about 6 months after I had my first baby, I unexpectedly found myself pregnant again. And unfortunately, that pregnancy ended up being ectopic and I lost my left fallopian tube in the surgery. So I have a less than optimal OB history for sure. But about a year after that, I had gone back to my midwife just kind of for my well woman pap smear exam. And she had asked me about if we wanted any more kids in the future and future pregnancies. And I told her that, yeah, we did. And we were starting to think about having another one. And that's when she kind of broke down to me kind of the seriousness of the accreta that I had and that any future pregnancies would be considered high risk. And I would have risked out of using the midwifery care, which I was bummed about because I really love my midwife. But she referred me to a super awesome OB. And so because we knew we did eventually want to start to have more kids, I met with the OB and kind of got the ball rolling. And she explained to me that she would want me to meet with the MFM or maternal fetal medicine team first, just to kind of do some preconception counseling on what a future pregnancy and delivery could look like and get an idea of my risk factor in that, as well as do some imaging. So that was the summer of 2023. They had me first do a sonohysterogram or a saline ultrasound. So basically, they just filled my uterus up with saline and then do an ultrasound. And then when those results came back, it showed that there was some linear strands compatible with myostenichiae, they call it, or like bands of scar tissue. So my OB was a little bit concerned about that. So she wanted me to do a little bit further testing. And they had me do a hysteroscopy where they just put me under some mild sedation and then actually go into my uterus with a camera and take a really good look at what's going on. So that procedure was kind of cool because I was sedated, but I was conscious. So she could talk to me and kind of show me exactly what she was seeing. And in that, she didn't see any abnormalities or scar tissue in my uterus. And she said it looked perfectly normal. So she was going to default to the MFM, but she felt like there was no greater risk factor for me carrying a second pregnancy. So I did meet with the MFM. He kind of explained the repeat risk of having another accreta is somewhere in like 20 to 30%. And because of my imaging and not showing much and the risk factors, he expected me to be on the lower end of that. So he was also happy with letting us go ahead and try for a second baby. We had some travel plans coming up. So we decided that we were going to wait to start trying till sometime in 2024. And also I was kind of expecting another tumultuous journey and I wasn't quite ready to jump back into that yet. We were enjoying our toddler in that stage of parenthood. So we decided we were going to wait until sometime in 2024 to start trying for our second baby. And so, yeah, that kind of brings me around to I'll just focus on the second story now.
Okay.
So, yeah, in Christmas of 2023, we had gone up to Canada to see my family. I'm originally Canadian and they all still live up there. So I was expecting my period to arrive on Christmas Eve. It just kind of stood out to me as a memorable date. And Christmas Eve came and went, and Christmas Day, and then Boxing Day, which is the day after Christmas or a holiday up there. And I still hadn't gotten my period. So I started to get a little suspicious. So I sent my husband into town to get a pregnancy test with the intention of I was going to take it and be really cool and just leave the room and come back in 5 minutes. And before I could even put the test down and wash my hands, the 2 pink lines popped right up and it was super positive. And I was pretty shocked because it was a bit earlier than we had been expecting. And like I said, I was expecting kind of a long journey again. So I don't have any cute story like telling my husband or anything. I just took a picture of the test and texted it to him while he was out running errands. And he was shocked as well. And unfortunately, going through the miscarriages and the ectopic pregnancy, it kind of took the joy out of positive pregnancy tests for us because more often than not, it had not ended successfully. So we were both pretty guarded about it. I was convinced it wasn't going to amount to much and trying not to get myself too attached. And I think we were hopeful, but pretty guarded about it. And we went back to the States and I contacted my OB and told her that we'd had this positive test. And she wanted us to start on some monitoring right away just to ensure this pregnancy wasn't ectopic, or if it was, catch it early on and hopefully save my last fallopian tube. So she had me start doing the beta HCG tests. And the first couple were doubling and everything looked great. And then I think it was the third or fourth one I had gone in for. It rose a little bit, but didn't anywhere near double. I think it had gone from like 16,000 to 19,000 or something like that. So that raised a couple red flags, because I guess that's what can happen with an ectopic, is it will grow normally at first, and then as it's more constricted, it'll stop. So she called me and wanted me to come in for some imaging right away. So that freaked me out, of course. And we went in, and fortunately they confirmed it was in my uterus and they could see a gestational sac, but it had been too early to see a heartbeat yet. So I felt relief. I was like, okay, it's not ectopic, but I didn't feel totally comfortable or confident in it yet. So they had us wait 2 weeks to come back for kind of the heartbeat confirmation. So that was a long 2-week wait, but we did it, and we went back in, and kind of right away on the screen, it popped up a nice healthy flutter and heartbeat, and baby was measuring as it was supposed to be. So kind of at that point, we took a deep breath and we're like, okay, hopefully we're having the second baby. We started to feel like it was real and we were pregnant. So we had told our older daughter and got excited about it. So again, with my second pregnancy, I had a pretty typical pregnancy. We decided not to find out the gender this go around. So that was fun. We had a lot of fun going back and forth with the old wives' tales and what things could mean. And I had a lot more nausea this go around, and I was really tired, but I was also chasing a toddler. So pretty typical pregnancy things. The one thing is we had decided to move to our bigger house, just expecting a new family member. So a lot of my pregnancy was focused on getting the old house prepared to sell and moving. And unfortunately, the weekend we moved, my daughter brought home a lovely case of norovirus, which I ended up getting. And I don't think I've ever been so sick. I couldn't even keep water down. So I did end up in the labor and delivery.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was awful. And we were trying to move, and my poor husband. But I ended up in labor and delivery just to monitor the baby, and they gave me some fluids and Zofran, and everything was fine. So in the end, it was all good, but it was just not fun and not ideal timing, but we made it through. So with this pregnancy, like I said, I'd risked out of using my midwife. So I was monitored by the OB, and then she had me kind of co-monitored by the MFM team. So starting about, I think it was 16 weeks, they had me go in to the MFM team for ultrasounds. They just had a more high definition or detailed ultrasound machine that they could kind of keep an eye on what was going on with my placenta. And it wasn't like there was much they could do if they saw some signs that it was adhering a little bit too deeply, but maybe just give a better idea for planning the birth and all that. So we got to see baby lots, which was fun in that way, but it was always a little bit nerve-wracking and kind of hoping that nothing looked abnormal. So thankfully, on any of those ultrasounds, they never did see anything. I think they called it abnormal placentation, or any evidence that it had been adhering a little too deeply. I guess they can see based on blood flow and stuff. And it's not a guarantee, but just might give an idea. And of course, if they don't see anything, it's not saying that things are going to be perfect, but it made me feel better that they didn't see any signs for sure. So we had originally been discussing doing an induction for this birth, just so that we could control the environment a little bit better. But because they didn't see any signs of it repeating and being on the lower end of the risk factor, both my OB and the MFM were okay with letting me go into labor on my own, which I was excited about. But with the caveat that they wanted me to deliver at a bigger hospital that was about an hour and 10 minutes away from me. Where I live is quite rural. It's a small hospital. So they wanted me to go where there would be multiple doctors on staff at a time, and the blood bank was there, and they have platelets and all that should anything happen. So I was nervous about making that really long drive. We all know it's not exactly fun to labor in the car. So I was nervous about that, but really I just wanted to be wherever was going to be safest for me and the baby. So our birth plan this go around was similar in that I wanted to have hopefully a lower intervention birth, but I was planning on getting an epidural again. I knew if I was going to have another manual placenta extraction, I wanted that epidural in. And really this go around, I was just hoping that my placenta would cooperate and everything would be okay and for a safe delivery. So that's kind of what we were planning. I knew they weren't going to let me go much past 40 weeks just for the sake of my placenta health and that. So I was doing all the at-home things to encourage labor late in my pregnancy. My new neighbors probably thought I was crazy, out curb walking every day, and I was drinking the tea and eating the dates, and you name it, I was trying it. So that was kind of my full-time job at the end of pregnancy. But yeah, other than that, the pregnancy was very healthy and normal, and I felt pretty good. Of course, there was a lot of buildup. It seemed like we were always talking about what was going to happen with my placenta and the labor and delivery, and it was nerve-wracking for sure. So we felt pretty confident, but I would definitely have my moments of, oh my goodness, what if something terrible happens, and stress that way. So I tried to just focus mostly on positive birth stories and hearing other women's experience, and that really helped me for sure. So yeah, that kind of brings me to my labor, starting with my second birth story.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and hear how labor started.
Yeah, so about 3:00 in the morning or so, when I was just shy of 39 weeks, I woke up with some, I would call it mild cramping. And I got my phone out to time them, and it couldn't have been too strong because before I could even really time it, I fell back asleep and got a couple more hours of sleep in. And then I woke up again about 5 a.m. And again, just some like mild cramping, and I couldn't quite tell if it was anything yet. And my husband had gotten up he was going to go into our clinic for the last day of treating patients before his paternity leave. And I told him I was kind of nervous about him going in and being far. If it did turn into something, he would have had to drive about 45 minutes in and then back and another hour to the hospital. So I told him I thought he should cancel his day, and just in case. And of course, as soon as I did that, like everything just stopped and no more cramping or contractions. And
Oh, no.
yeah, I was like, oh no, these poor patients that now had their appointments canceled, and my husband is not going to be able to see them. But so we just kind of went about our normal morning. We took our daughter into town and went to the breakfast at the bakery and took her to the playground and picked up some groceries. And I was getting contractions or cramping very irregularly. I would get kind of a mild sensation, and then 15 minutes later something, and then an hour would go by with nothing. And they were never very intense. Like it was never enough to stop me in my tracks or have me breathe through them or anything like that. And they were super irregular. So I couldn't time them at all. And I just kind of chalked it up to either some Braxton Hicks or the early stages of some prodromal labor. And it didn't seem like too much was happening. So I remember at one point in time, we brought my daughter home and she fell asleep on me on the couch, and it was well over an hour that she had napped, and I didn't get a single contraction. So I kind of admitted defeat that it wasn't going to be today. And we got up and started making some dinner. And my, I guess, side story on this is my mom and her husband were driving down from Canada to take care of our older daughter while we were at the hospital. So they had been driving all that day. We had originally been planning on them coming down the Saturday, but for whatever reason, we switched it and they were coming down that Friday. So while this was all going on, they were making their way down from Canada. So we just kind of started preparing some dinner in anticipation that they were going to arrive. And all of a sudden I got hit with this like really, really intense contraction. It took my breath away, and I had to bend over the counter and really breathe through it. And I said, holy, that was super intense and way more than I had been getting. And then what felt really quickly again, another one really intense again, and then another one. And so I got my phone out and started timing them, and they were coming about every 2.5 minutes. And I was looking at the clock, and it was about 3:00 or so by now. And I was mostly worried about getting over to the hospital in rush hour and the drive having to be any longer than it already was. So I was kind of thinking we should get going, but I was also really nervous about getting sent away and not being in active labor again with being so far away from home. So they had told me, second time, Mom, when your contractions are 7 minutes apart, lasting a full minute for an hour, come in. And mine never had reached that at all. They kind of went from super sporadic and well over an hour to like every 2.5 minutes, and they were coming on intensely. So I called the nurses line and explained what was going on, and that we had this kind of long drive, and they agreed that I should come in and that they would figure it out if I wasn't far enough along and all that. So I agreed to go in, and we still had my older daughter home with us. We just moved to the area, and I didn't really have anybody I felt super comfortable leaving her with. And my husband's mom is nearby, but she still would have been over an hour to get to us. So I came up with this kind of grand plan in my head that I texted my mom to see how far they would have been from the hospital, and she was only going to be about half an hour, 45 minutes behind us. So I figured we would just bring my older daughter to the hospital with us, and she could hang out with us in triage. And then my mom would pick her up and bring her home, and I'd get my epidural and we'd get admitted, and it'd be a while before baby came. So that was my grand plan in my head, at least. So we packed up my daughter, and kind of a cute side story. We had taken her to pick out some presents for her future baby brother or baby sister as part of introducing a new sibling. And when we told her we were going to go to the hospital, she was really, really adamant about bringing these presents, even though I kept telling her, like, no, we're not going to meet baby today. Like, you'll come back tomorrow with your grandma and meet the baby. But she was really adamant on bringing them. So foreshadowing, she apparently knew something we didn't. So we packed her into the car and off we went. Before we left, I was having really bad back labor. So I had my husband put a TENS unit on, or it's transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. It basically just runs a really gentle current. And it doesn't necessarily take away the pain, but it kind of like will distract or override a little bit of that pain signal. So I found that really helpful. especially having to be in the car in labor. And I also used a birth comb. So every time I'd feel a contraction coming on, I would crank that TENS unit way up and squeeze my birth comb. And oddly enough, one thing I found really helpful, which is probably just a me thing and most people wouldn't agree with, is I actually liked watching the clock when I was having a contraction because I knew they were peaking about 30 seconds and that was the worst of it. So I would tell myself like, hey, you can make it to 30 seconds. And then after that, it's going to get better and be much better. So I would watch the clock intensely and that 30 seconds would hit. And it was almost like I would start to psychologically feel better at that point. So the car ride was really, really intense, even more so than I was expecting. It did not feel like my early labor with my first baby at all. But I kept just kind of chalking it up to that it was because I was having this back labor this time. And of course, because it was rush hour, the navigation app kept taking us all these like back windy country roads we had never taken before. And my husband is great at a lot of things, but following the navigation is not one of them. So he kept almost missing turns, and then I was getting frustrated. And then at one point, it was just, at one point he did miss a turn and then tried to convince me, oh no, that didn't add much time, I swear. And I said, no, I've been watching that clock. I don't want to do this any longer than I have to. And that added 6 minutes. So you will turn around. And he did. And we were fine. We made it to the hospital, and we went to go check in with our older daughter in tow, and the gal at the front desk was asking me just some kind of administrative questions, and I was having a really hard time answering them. I was definitely kind of in labor land at that point. So a nurse came and grabbed me and said, let's just go to triage and we'll get all this back there. And she kind of started giving me the spiel about, okay, we're going to hook you up to the monitoring and check on baby, and then we'll give you a cervical exam and see where you're at. And why don't you go to the bathroom and get changed and we'll come back and get that started. So I stood up to go to the bathroom and just felt that big pop and a huge gush of water everywhere. And my water broke all over the triage floor. So my husband stuck his head into the hallway and told the nurse that my water had broke. So she kind of just did a little U-turn and came right back in and said, never mind about the monitoring. We're just going to admit you. So they brought me back into the labor and delivery room. Even though I had technically risked out of using a midwife, when we had arrived, the only provider that was available was this nurse midwife that I'm just very thankful it ended up the way it does, because she was just kind of the perfect person I needed in that moment. But they were just going to have me get started with the midwife, and I guess the OBs that were there were in a procedure. So they had us get started with the midwife, and I immediately asked for the epidural. And she kind of calmly and kindly said, well, come in and we'll get you checked and see how far along you are. And my experience, second-time moms whose water break like yours did and sound and look like you did are usually quite far along. So let's get you checked out and then we'll talk about it. So she checked me and she just looked at me and said, you are a 10 and baby is right there. It's go time. And I kind of looked at her and said, I'm not getting that epidural, am I? And she so calmly just said, no, you're not. And it just kind of caused a mindset shift in me. I've just said, okay, let's do this. And I kind of knew it was the only way out of this is to go through it. So it had changed our birth plan, but I was ready. And I kind of had another cool moment that really stood out with me with the midwife, that in between these contractions, I was trying to explain to her my history with the placenta accreta and all that had gone on and how I was really worried about hemorrhaging again. And I wasn't sure if she had time to look at my file or anything like that, or if she knew. And she just super calmly and confidently looked at me and said, that's not going to happen again. I'm not worried about it. And just kind of her confidence and being so cool and calm and collected about it really encouraged me and made me feel a lot better about it. It just kind of took that worry away. So I was really thankful for that. And so I guess it was go time to push. But meanwhile, we still had our daughter with us. My parents had not made it to the hospital yet. So the nurses were super helpful. They tried to come in and see if she wanted to go for a walk with them. And of course, she didn't want to leave mom and dad. So she kind of just sat in the corner there, a little bit of a deer in the headlights look, and was watching everything. And it was cute. They brought her a thing to color. And the midwife said, oh, were you coloring a picture for your baby brother or baby sister, a birthday present? And was asking her if they should sing happy birthday to the baby when the baby arrived. So everyone was really great about kind of having this unexpected guest. And she did great too. She just kind of hung out in the corner, and I could tell she was a little apprehensive of what was going on. She had that kind of deer in the headlights look, but she did really well, actually. So it was time to push. And the baby was sunny side up, which is why I was having all that back labor. So the midwife had me lay on my right side to start, which really did increase the intensity of the pain and contraction. But the midwife was super encouraging and telling me, what you're doing is working. Baby is turning. You're only going to have to do this for another contraction or two, and then you can get into whatever position you want to. So I found that really helpful. And the pushing stage was definitely intense and uncomfortable, but I almost found it relieving in a way too, and preferred it, I think, because it gave me a task or something to focus on. And like it was productive. I quite liked the pushing stage, even with the intensity of it. I was trying not to be too vocal. I was trying not to scare my older daughter too much. But, when you're in that moment, sometimes the vocalizations just come out. And so in between contractions, I would assure her that mom's okay and this is all normal and baby's coming. And so that was kind of a interesting dynamic between I would be in this like labor land locked in moment and then get through contraction and feel a few moments of relief to reassure her and all that. So, and my husband was awesome too at supporting me and going back and forth and telling me I was so strong and could do this and then checking in with her. So that was really appreciated. And I didn't have to push too long. I think it was about 20 minutes or so. And the midwife had used some compresses and hot oils and all that. And I really appreciate that because I didn't end up tearing it all, even with it had gone pretty fast. So probably about 20 minutes or so later, I kind of felt that ring of fire and I'm sure let out a few profanities. But the midwife said, it's okay. It's okay. Like ring of fire means it's almost over. And she said, I think you're going to meet your baby on this next contraction. And what's coming out right after that? And then I kind of said, my placenta, like almost felt like we were manifesting it. And I did. I felt the ring of fire. And then I gave a couple more small pushes. And at 4:46 p.m., the midwife kind of cheerfully said, baby's out, baby's out. And to this day, we still like sing it the same way she did every time we take her out of the bath. So it's kind of funny, but
oh, it's cute.
Yeah, it was really cute. Even my daughter, every time we pick her, my older daughter, when we pick the baby out of the bath, she says, baby's out, baby's out. So it's just kind of a fun memory from the day.
Yeah.
And it was just they put baby on my chest and I just had this moment of, I can't even describe it any other way than it was just like this euphoric moment of, I had such an overwhelming sense of joy and pride. I couldn't believe I had just done that. I felt so strong and it was like, holy cow, I can't believe how fast that just went and that I had done it and baby is here. And it was just this really cool moment and unexpected, but I just felt like superwoman getting through that. So we had, at this point didn't know what we were having. So finally the midwife, and we hadn't even thought to really we were just I was crying happy tears and kept saying, hi baby, hi baby. And the midwife finally said, what did you have? And so my husband announced it's a girl, which was another really cool moment because I was able to immediately turn to my older daughter and say, baby, you got your sister, because that's what she had wanted. So that was a lot of fun. And then only about 5 or 6 minutes after I had birthed the baby, my placenta had started to detach and the midwife said everything was looking good and normal. So my husband picked up my older daughter and they cut the cord together and out came my placenta with minimal effort and everything looked great. And I had minimal bleeding this go around. When I went back and looked at my chart notes with my first labor and delivery, I had lost, they had estimated about 1,200 milliliters of blood. And this time it was only about 250. So I felt much different this go around. And it was just really nice to have this. It felt redeeming, I guess, to have this totally normal, uncomplicated physiologic birth after kind of going through a bit of a scary situation the first go around and so much hype leading up to the birth about what could happen and what could possibly go wrong. And so it felt really good to just have this normal, uncomplicated delivery. So they did, it was fun. The midwife got my daughter and they sang happy birthday to her just like they had kind of talked about. And it was just such a special, cool moment that, never in a million years would I have planned to have my older daughter with us in the hospital room. That was never even on my radar, but it ended up being pretty cool in the end that she got to be there and sing happy birthday to her sister and cut the cord. So
yeah, so sweet.
We look back and my parents made it to the hospital about 6 minutes after the baby was born. So we always joke with my mom if she would have made one last bathroom break on her road trip. But again, now getting through it, I wouldn't change it. And it was really fun to have her there in the end and pretty cool. So yeah, we had a really nice kind of golden, it was almost even 2 hours that they kept baby on my chest. And my older daughter was just such a proud big sister. She'd barely been put on my chest and she jumped right up with her presents to show them to her. And it was really cute. So yeah, my parents got to come back and meet the baby pretty shortly after. And yeah, we enjoyed a nice couple hours of just bonding and everything was much more calm this go around, which was really nice too. So yeah, that was kind of the story of how my second came into the world.
Yeah. Does your daughter have much memory of it?
She does. She talks about it, but not, I was kind of not concerned, but curious about what questions she would have afterwards and all that. And she does talk about it. And she talks about baby coming out of mommy's tummy. And they gave her a hospital band bracelet that said, "I'm a big sister." And that's like her pride and joy. She wore it and it just ripped the other day and it was devastating and came off. But she would proudly show that to people about when she was at the hospital with.
So cute.
But she didn't seem to have any questions about details or anything like that. Like, I don't know how much she could actually see sitting at my head.
Yeah.
But I think it was a positive experience overall. I hope either will owe her a lot of therapy later in life or she'll become an OB or midwife or something. But
yeah, well, my kids were at my third birth and they were 5 and 7 and they like barely remember it. So
yeah. I'm curious as she gets older, how much she'll remember of it. 'Cause she was only 3.5 at the time. So not even 3.5. So just over 3. So I doubt she'll remember much of it, but
she'll remember it from stories.
Exactly. She'll see the stories and the pictures. And it was such a happy memory for my husband and me for sure. Yeah. And like I said, we never would have planned it that way, but it kind of worked out that way for a reason, I think, and just became kind of such a wonderful memory. So
yeah. All right. Well, anything from postpartum you want to share?
I had a really enjoyable postpartum the second go around. Immediately, it was quite different than my first in the hospital. I mean, understandably, I had hemorrhaged in the first, so they were constantly in my room checking on me, and I had to get quite a few blood draws to check my hemoglobin levels and my vitals. So they were always in there, and we never got any rest. The second go around, they checked on me and baby a couple times, but otherwise pretty much left us alone and got some time to bond with the baby. And she latched right away. I had a lot of breastfeeding difficulties with my first and had to use a nipple shield for a while and all that. But the second baby latched right away and we've had a great breastfeeding journey so far. So that was good. And even longer term postpartum, I think August was a really nice time to have a baby too, because we spent a lot of time outside, which really helped. And we had a lot of support. My family was here and my husband's mom was around a lot and helpful. So we had a really nice postpartum. And I kind of always joke, like, I don't know if it's that we're more chill second time parents or it's a chill baby or maybe a combo of both, but we've had a much easier go around this time. So postpartum was pretty uneventful for us, thankfully. So yeah.
All right. Well, any resources you want to share?
Yeah. So I wanted to mention, obviously this podcast is a great resource too, but as part of that, joining the Patreon group or the Facebook group that you get to be a member as part of being a Patreon member, I found really helpful.
Oh, good.
There's such awesome people in there. And I think most topics have been covered that you can find by searching. And if it hasn't been, everybody is always super helpful with advice.
Yeah, that search bar is a gold mine. I mean, we've had the group for almost 10 years now, so it makes sense.
Yeah, everything from, we've talked about trying to conceive and pregnancies and complications, even up to like parenting things. And I just find it's definitely the most helpful Facebook group around pregnancy and parenting that I'm part of. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, there was a post in there today and the person was like, I've come to this group for every other stage of things. So today I'm here with the toddler question. And I love that people are there for many years.
Totally. And I've seen it's like women that I've had babies around my first go around. And then again, we're having babies again around the second times too. So it's a lot of fun. And the Zoom calls are fun too. You kind of get to hear people's birth stories even before they come out or some cool stories. So I really recommend that Facebook group.
Well, thank you so much, of course, for your support and then for saying so. I think Patreon really is going to be the future for a lot of independent podcasters because that way the ads and everything work are just changing so much with networks and everything. So I'm so appreciative of my Patreon members and I love that it's brought so much good benefits to your life.
Yes, I find the Patreon group, super worth it for the podcast, but also just being able to get to be a member of that group. Another one, with being a chiropractor, my practice revolves around treating pregnant women and the pediatric population. So I get asked a lot about finding a chiropractor in pregnancy. So I usually recommend starting to look on the ICPA, it's called, or the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association's website, and looking for a Webster certified chiropractor. Mm-hmm. Webster's the technique that we can get certified in that optimizes a woman's body to help breech baby flip. But it's generally a good indicator that someone has taken extra training kind of above and beyond what we get in school for pregnancy. So that's a good place to start. And I have colleagues kind of all over the country now. So if someone's looking and they want to reach out, I'm happy to see if I happen to know anybody that I could recommend in that area. But that's kind of a good place to start. And then I was going to quickly mention an app that I found in my second pregnancy for some pregnancy safe workouts called Move Your Bump, which I found really helpful. They have it tailored by trimester up to postpartum as well, or even labor prep exercises and that. So I found that app really helpful. And that's another one I've been recommending.
Awesome.
So yeah, those are kind of my resources.
Thank you. Those are great. Yeah, the chiropractor one is the same tip I give people. It's like a good way to narrow it down at least.
Totally.
Yeah. A lot. Yeah. All right. And then where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. You can find me at lindsay.is, my first name, LINDSAY, and then .is. And I'm happy to answer any questions on there.
All right. Well, thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, now I'm going to chat with Kate about Aeroflow breast pumps and getting your breast pump for free through insurance, as well as their free lactation classes that you can sign up for and your insurance will cover. Let's chat with Kate. Hi, Kate. Thanks so much for coming on the Birth Hour today to chat with me about Aeroflow breast pumps.
Yay. Hi, Bryn. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, you reached out via Instagram about Aeroflow and your experience with them, and I was so excited to talk with you. So will you just tell people a little bit about, how you found Aeroflow and the process you went through for using their services?
Yeah, for sure. So it was actually through the Birth Hour, through your podcast, that I heard about Aeroflow and decided to just fill out the form. It's like a very simple form you fill out online where you put in your insurance information and then like Aeroflow does the rest.
Yeah.
And so they got me a free breast pump. I think it was the Spectra is the one that was the one I chose through insurance. But Aeroflow will actually show you like all of the different pumps available to you, how much they cost through insurance. Some of them, like you do have to pay a little bit. And then they show you the ones that are fully covered. And so I decided, I chose the Spectra and they sent it to me. And then I think I got like an email or a text that said like, hey, thanks for, using Aeroflow. You should also sign up for our lactation classes. And, you get tons of those sort of promotional emails.
Right.
And I didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, whatever. I'll take a look at this later. And then I started looking more into it and I was like, oh, actually these classes look pretty cool. They were fully virtual and they were covered by insurance. And so I decided, I was like, what the heck, let's do it. And I signed up for, I think, 4 different classes. I only made it to 2 of them, but the 2 that I went to were Lactation 101 and Pumping 101. And they're just like such great classes. I was like so surprised by the quality of the classes. They're taught by, is it
IBCLC?
Yeah. And they just gave a ton of good information about starting breastfeeding off right. And so it also would be helpful too for people who are newly breastfeeding, just kind of work through some potential breastfeeding issues like latching or positioning. But yeah, I contribute a lot to my success. So my daughter is 4 weeks old now. And we had a pretty solid start to breastfeeding. I've been exclusively breastfeeding and I contribute a lot of it to having that support from the class. The way the classes run too they're live.
Oh, cool. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, they're virtual. So you can join via Zoom.
Yeah. But
they're live. And so the instructor is there teaching the course. They're also really just super good teachers. I felt like the way they presented information was really good. They had tons of visuals and videos, live demonstrations where they have a baby doll and they were showing different positions and ways to get baby to latch. And so they are live though, so you can ask questions. And so you're able to ask questions in the chat. You can, unmute and have a conversation back and forth. So very helpful for if you have specific questions too about lactation.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Especially like you said, even after baby arrives to be able to look at the positioning of the baby doll and position your own baby on screen and be like this, or that's great.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And the pumping 101, this is my first baby and I had never pumped before. And so I have the same pump that they were using in the demo, the Spectra.
Oh, nice.
And so it was really cool to I kind of walked along with, did the demo along with them on the same pump, which was just really helpful having never used a breast pump before.
Yeah.
They look kind of scary. At least to me, they looked pretty scary. And so it was nice to be able to sort of walk through with the instructor and get a demo.
So when you were signing up for it, was the scheduling, were there several a month or lots of options or?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was pretty convenient. They gave a few times a month, I want to say. and like different, I want to say they were like different hours too.
Okay.
But it was like scheduling was really, really easy. I remember like, cause they have, all your information, like they have insurance information already. And so they do all the back end work of clearing this with insurance, because they're classes run by professionals and they do cost money, but insurance covers the cost. And so they would like take attendance at the beginning of the Zoom call. And then they did like all that back end work to make sure it was covered by insurance. And so I didn't have to do anything except like put in my name and email to sign up. So yeah, like really easy.
Awesome.
And again, like kind of going into it, I was like, I'll give this a try, kind of see what it's like. And then I was just like captivated. I remember after getting off particularly the Lactation 101 call, and just like being like to my partner, like, oh my gosh, you've got to hear like what I learned.
Oh, cool.
Like he was like, wow, you see, like, you're like an expert now in lactation. I was like, I feel like it. Like, I feel like I'm like, have a lot of good, solid information. So yeah, like super pleasantly surprised by how informative and just helpful the classes were.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that I had posted about Aeroflow on Instagram and you responded like, their classes are amazing. And so I knew you were passionate about it enough to like respond to an Instagram story.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. And I knew they had lactation education, but I wasn't fully aware of the format and everything and the fact that they're live. I mean, that's like having your own virtual lactation consultant. So that's amazing.
And I had taken like a childbirth ed class, paid for, like it was a community one that I paid for here. And I live in Minneapolis. And it was like, one of the weeks we went over lactation, and it was like similar information, but like free, like I was like, and it also like it was kind of went more in depth, because the Aeroflow class was specifically a lactation class, like the Lactation 101 class is what I'm thinking of. So yeah, it was just like very quality, like good information.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to add this definitely to our resources on the website and our childbirth course, because we go over a lot of that stuff as well. But the live aspect, I think, is just so great, even if it's a refresher for, second or third time, or you already took a class, just something to kind of get a refresher and ask questions and things like that. So.
And there are some other classes, like the other ones I signed up for but didn't end up making. There was like one on like maternity leave, like, and your kind of like, I think, lactation stuff around leave and like going back to work.
Right.
But yeah, they were all covered through insurance. So.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to have to reach out to Aeroflow and audit these classes so that I can talk about it more as well. But thank you so much for shining a spotlight on it.
Yeah, for sure. Highly recommend. So when you get that email or that text that says, hey, do you want to also sign up for the classes? You should do it. Because like I said, I was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, like promotional email for Airflow, but.
Right. And we're all paying so much for insurance, like we might as well get as much out of it as we can.
Totally. It was well worth it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Kate.
Yeah, of course, Fran. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much to Lindsay for sharing her stories with us and to Aeroflow for sponsoring this episode. Remember to head over to aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour to get started with all of their offerings and free breast pump through insurance and all of that. And then if you want to find out more about becoming a Patreon member, you can do that at patreon.com/birthhour. And then of course, if you want to join our online childbirth course, that is at thebirthhour.com/course. All of those things should be linked on the website, thebirthhour.com, where you can also find Lindsay's show notes page by just searching for her name in the search bar. And we'll also put those things linked in the podcast app where you're listening to this episode.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.